Hello and welcome to another video. I'm Paul, your host. This is the Esoteric Explorer channel. I hope you're all doing remarkably well. So, as some of you will know, I recently visited Gwynedd in Wales and I had a fantastic time checking out some of the sites on the star maps of Gwynedd, and I met up with some fantastic people like Hugh Evans, Lawrence Main and John Hart, to name but a few. On one evening during my stay in Machynlleth, I was fortunate enough to watch a highly skilled storyteller tell one of the stories from the Mabinogion, a collection of Welsh stories that go back into the mists of antiquity. Some even suggest that these are the oldest stories in the world. Anyway, it was a hugely enjoyable evening, in large part because of the wonderful storytelling, but also because it was accompanied by a 5-star lasagna and a refreshing pint of local ale. Big up to the Red Lion pub. Now, I managed to persuade our storyteller, Jackdaw, to hop onto the channel to perform another story from the Mabinogion, Merlin and the Pig. Now, unfortunately, our connection was very weak, so I had to record our interview on audio only and then edit out the severe lag. But it was worth it because Millie is a wonderful storyteller, and storytelling is a great way of preserving our history. After the interview, you will see Millie perform Merlin and the Pig in the woods, so make sure you watch the video to the end. Millie is currently on tour in Wales, so if you're in the area, please check out her website, milliejackdaw.com, for more details. Millie is a professionally trained actress who performs these stories on nature walks and in schools, theatres and museums. So, make yourself a cup of tea, sit back and enjoy the video. So, Millie, how did you become a storyteller? How did it all start for you?
Well, it all started really with my wonderful parents who read me stories and took me to the theatre. So I developed stories and a love of performing and performance. I had a passion for acting, did all sorts of acting training along the way, and eventually became an actor and part of a children's theatre company doing theatre in education. So we toured around schools in London. I was living in London, presenting plays and running workshops, and it was all very much centered around the environment and nature. So we would take children out into the wilds as well and teach them about nature and engage them with nature through performing. And then I discovered storytelling. Really, it was a book that I found in Boscastle, but it's a really fascinating place, and they've got a museum of witchcraft there and a very esoteric bookshop. And I came across this book called The Wildwood King that had an intriguing cover, and it was basically a collection of stories. And it was the first thing really that introduced me to the idea of storytelling and the storyteller being a thing. And one of the stories in there just hit me so powerfully with such a strong message that I just really felt like I wanted to share that story. So I learned the story. At the time, I was an actor, so I kind of learned it like a script and recited it. But that was sort of my inroad into discovering storytelling. So I sort of developed it as another strand of my work, because it's much easier to get work as a single solo performer rather than, a whole theatre company that requires, quite a lot of money and transport and props and costumes. And I just loved the fact that storytelling is just so mobile, just one person carrying wherever it is called and sharing that story, and everything happens in the mind of the listener, and that's the power of it.
Definitely.
And I think also, to me, as being a little bit of a control freak, it play all the roles in the story. I could be all the different characters. I could be the director, and presented it in the way I wanted to present it. So it gave me this real new for my creativity. I could bring poetry into music into it, songs, I just fell in love with
That's wonderful.
it. And then
Wonderful.
when I moved to Wales, I became kind of my main thing.
And what's it like living in Wales? I have to ask you this because I've been to Wales twice in my life. The first time was in 1975. I don't remember it because I was 6 weeks old. And the second time, obviously, was very recently. And I fell in love with the place. So what's it been like living for Wales for you?
Oh, it's been incredible transformation from London, lots of amazing experiences, cultural opportunities there, and so many people, so many great friends. But Wales has just been the most rich and culturally, environmentally, the nature here, the natural environment. I'm on the coast. I love living by the sea. And the people are really beautiful, mostly I find really, really friendly. And obviously it holds this kind of great wealth of cultural, ancient history, etc., which is really, really fascinating, and the mythology itself, which I'm really enjoying learning more and more about.
So how effective is storytelling as a method of preserving our history, Millie?
To me, it's as valuable as any form of archaeology can be. I'm fascinated by our ancient history and by archaeology and all the ways that we have in learning more about our ancient past. But I think that when we learn how to read the stories, to understand the symbol and see them in the way that our ancestors would have seen them, then they're actually like an incredible wealth of information about ancient cultures. And this has been preserved orally, been passed down from generation to generation. So, we don't have to depend on ancient artifacts and stones and carvings and such like that degrade over time. And I mean, obviously, the stories do change over time. You've got the Chinese whisper effect, and that they've gone through many cultural lenses to reach us in the form they are now. But it's an incredible way of preserving ancient knowledge and understandings and ways and views of the world into a form that is preserved, passed on over eons and eons of time.
So how challenging is it to interpret these stories to modern day audiences? Do you employ some creative interpretation or are they completely authentic?
It's a very good question. I try to be as true to the text that I have as possible in many ways, because fully understand the stories, which ever really know how fully we understand them. We can't ever really know how accurate it was for these stories. So if we play about with them too much, could be losing something that's important, because my idea is that these stories, as being a form of entertainment and a means of communicating ideas, knowledge, wisdom, etc., they're also written in a way that works on our subconscious. They kind of create patterns within us. So it's important to preserve that in the telling as much as possible. However, I also see it as my role to make these tales more accessible to people in our day, and to sort of the relevance that they might have for our current way of life and situation. And tales really are for telling rather than reading. So, for example, in the 11th century, and it's really rich text to try and get your head around, to try and read, but the story draw out the kind of core of the story without too much embellishment, and then tell that in a way which is really and helps to bring that imagery to life in the mind of the listener, that really bring it alive. Because with mythology and with folk tales as well, and fairy tales, there's so much in there that is to us that these are about human journeys, archetypal human journeys that we all experience in some way at some time of our lives.
Okay, and from what I witnessed at the Red Lion pub in McKinley, you did that remarkably well. It was a wonderful experience, so thank you. So I'm not going to get too political now, Millie, but I usually ask my guests this question, and I feel as though I should ask you. So why do you think our ancient history is so disregarded by academia?
Well, we have become more scientifically orientated in our present day, and there's a sense of, if something isn't in stone, then we can't believe it's true, and that's present in all walks of life, in our medical world. Some of our holistic therapies have been discredited because they haven't done enough scientific research on them. So, I guess it's something that is quite to interpretation, and therefore cannot be definitively or another. But that's what I love about storytelling, rather than being an academic, because I'm not saying this is the truth. I'm saying this is my creative interpretation of my understanding of it. Take it or leave it. I'm telling a story. I'm not kind of an authority on this. So why do I think that it's been dismissed? Well, I think that the truth sets you free, doesn't it? And it seems clear to me that somewhere along the line, who we really are, our ancestors had a much, much deeper connection to nature and to supernature. This is clear through the stories. And this is one of the things that fascinates me about it, and what I try to bring out in my telling of these stories is that understanding, the wisdom that the ancients had of how we lived our lives much more in accord with nature, and much more knowing of ourselves as multi-dimensional beings. Whereas the political establishment maybe can deal with humanity more easily when we're more fixed in our superficial egoic mind, I would say. Is that the kind of answer you're looking for?
Yes, I think that's a wonderful answer. It makes complete sense, and I can see how you don't feel constrained as a storyteller. You can be creative, so that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Now, can you recall for us the first time you heard, and forgive me for my rubbish pronunciation, the Dinas Emrith story of Merlin's prophecy?
Yes, I can indeed. And it was a very profound experience. The time I heard that story, it was being told to me by an incredible storyteller called Mabinogion, who is originally from Australia but has spent most of his life in the UK. He now runs the Mabinogion Retreat Centre in Snowdonia, and he's an extraordinary storyteller. And he was telling this story as part of a collection of tales that he's sharing. And at the beginning of the evening, I'll never forget this, he passed around a cup of mead, and we all had a sip of this really beautiful mead. And obviously mead features in the story. I don't know whether it was like particularly potent mead, literally just had a sip. But when he came of the story where Merlin is giving his prophecy, I literally had this almost like a hallucination. I was watching him, things kind of went crazy. Like he seemed to shapeshift into Merlin. And literally it was like Merlin was speaking through him, looking into my and just transmitting this prophecy. I was like being down with this prophecy. And when I came out of that, I couldn't remember anything. It had gone on such a deep level. It was the most bizarre experience. And I guess experiences like that are what have drawn me deeper along this. There's a lot more to it than just pure entertainment value. There's something going on.
Mm-hmm.
I call it a mythic quest.
Sounds to me like it was magic mushroom mead, judging by what you've just said. Who knows? But it's a great story. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Millie. Okay, I'm going to hand over to you now, and you're going to perform the story of Merlin and the Pig from the Mabinogion. Best of luck, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure.
And one last thing, Millie, I understand you're doing a tour at the moment in Wales. Where can people find out about that tour?
Yeah, I'm touring a show called Mochyn Merlin, or Merlin's Pig, which is bringing together the stories of Merlin and also of the pig, the sow and the boar, and the stories that they feature in, because it's a very potent symbol in the Celtic culture. And I'm also in this show weaving in some of my own stories, some of my own journey, and what's drawn me into this. And you can find out all the information about it on my website, which is Millie with a Y, Jackdaw.com. All the tour dates are there. And there's also a blog with more information about the background and the research that I've done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Millie. Okay, break a leg.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Mochyn Merlin, Merlin's Pig, Part 3. Canolfan Prydain, the centre of Britain, Calon Mai, May Eve, long, long ago. Within the earth, 2 little piglets stirred, snuffling hungrily as tendrils of mycelium lit up around their tender forms, and their mother's whispers roused them. Wake up, you glorious ones, and grow. And as they grew, they lit up like two electric strands on a double helix spiral, becoming their full selves, their dragon selves, reborn as everything is from the ashes of death. And as the dragons woke and rose to embrace the light, the people gathered, dancing around blazing fires, within rings of stone, upon the hilltops, and in the sweet places where the dragons woke. And the people fed them, encouraged them with all manner of wild frolics and fornications. This is how it had always been, for forever and a day, until this day. Story beginning day. This day, the dragons woke and rose at dawn, but their song was a scream, their violence extreme as they slashed with their talons and ripped with their fangs, their pain piercing stakes throughout the land. From the east to the west, the south to the north, the unstoppable blast of sound poured forth. Leaves withered, birds fell from the sky, people lost their minds, some even died. Rivers and lakes stagnated, and the hawthorn blossom was swept from the trees by the sour winds. No corn ripened, nor barley, nor wheat, nor fruits on the trees, nor babies conceived, nor lambs, calves, chicks, or even frogs born. Things died and remained unborn. Now, at that time, the land of Britain was ruled by King Iechyd, a fair and honest king, son of Beli Mawr. And the people petitioned him most earnestly to take action to remedy this terrible plague that afflicted land and lives. May Eve came around again, and King Iechyd, under advice from his wiser brother Llefelys, made his way to the place he had calculated was the very centre of Britain, which we are told is near Oxford. He took with him a vat of the sweetest mead, 2 stone jars, a mud-coloured cloth, and some beeswax. He placed the vat into the ground, there in the very epicentre of Britain, covered it with the cloth, put beeswax in his ears to guard against the screaming, and waited, hiding in a bush. Soon he could feel the reverberations, and he knew that the screaming had begun again, and when he looked, he saw, rising up from the ground, 2 dragons, one red, the other white, fighting ferociously, tooth and claw, spiralling around and around. At last their power waned, and they became 2 oxen, charging through the ether, clashing horns. See now, they become once more their piglet forms, falling down, 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 through the mud-coloured cloth and into the vat of sweet mead, and there they supped and slurped and guzzled and gulped and guzzled up all that delicious mead, eventually falling into a deep, contented oblivion. That was when Iechyd took his opportunity. He grasped each of the little dragon piglets and secured them into the stone jars, sealing them tight. Then he carted them from one place of profound power to another in the west, Gorllewin. After the liberation of the dragons, Merlin stayed in that place for a long time, and it is known to this day as Dinas Emrys, the city of the Emrys. But what about those dragons? Well, they were last seen heading northwards, perhaps seeking out the next incarnation of Merlin. Wait, there's another incarnation? Well, perhaps. Or could it be that one such as he had superhuman longevity? Or maybe those dragons were seeking out the druids, following their trail northwards. But weren't the druids wiped out by the Romans? That is what the Romans and their history makers would have us believe. But the druids were canny. They knew what was coming. There would be a massacre. But many of them left, taking their mysteries and their secrets, heading westward to Ireland, and north through what was still Wales at that time, Iechyd, all the way up to the wall in the north. So, let's follow them, those dragons and druids, and take a peek over the wall. From the Solway to the River Forth was the territory of the Gwir Gogledd, the men of the north. 13 kings who refused to fall under Roman authority, reigning in glory, fighting the Picts, the Angles, and each other. The splendour of their courts, the fame of their deeds, and the profusion of their generosity would be praised in song by the greatest of poets. Now, their territory at that time was covered in a thick, wild forest, inhabited by animals and birds of all kinds. An alive forest, a bit like this one I'm in now, with the domains of the 13 kings spread along its fringes. And the people understood the need to feed the wild heart of nature. They gave praises and offerings to the great mother goddess who births all life and receives the dead. And presiding over this vital relationship between humans and nature and supernature were the shaman priests and priestesses, the men and women of knowledge. They were the midwives, healers, shapeshifters, seers, poets, prophets, geomancers, astronomers, lawmakers, storytellers. And chief among them, Merlin ap Morvran, he of the Selgovai tribe, who was all of these things, and a highly skilled warrior to boot. Picture him now. A man of rugged intensity, piercing, intelligent eyes, dressed in deerskin. In one hand, an ash staff coiled with copper. Around his neck, a golden torque, sign of his nobility. And at his side, a wild wolf, companion to him wherever he went. See them running across the rugged terrain with ease and speed, making their way towards the hall of King Gwenddolai, the last of the pagan kings. As they approach it, the gates open and a great profusion meets their senses. Sounds of cattle bellowing and squealing pigs and hammers on anvils and the shouts of youths practicing their warrior skills and butchering and bartering and wood chopping and bantering and tethered dogs snarling and snapping as Merlin and Wolf passed by, swiftly silenced by a motion of Merlin's staff. Within Gwenddolai's hall, a heat of feasting was in progress. Men sat on low couches covered with fur, taking full advantage of their host's hospitality, for the upholding of their pledges of loyalty to him were dependent on it. Great platters piled high with meat, most of it pork. Pitchers of mead and wine and ale. And at the head of the table, King Gwenddolai sat listening intently to the boasting and claims to lineage of his men. An expected ritual, for the greater were their merits, the greater were his and those of the tribe. A little behind him on either side were 2 vultures. I got caught up in the undergrowth. 2 vultures on wooden posts. They flapped and screeched as Merlin entered. Ah, Merlin, croeso, friend yn wyl. Gwelwyd dy bresynoleb. Wyt ti'n dod gyda chaneuon, neu gyda newyddion? Gyda newyddion y glwydd, ac o math mwy cyddryblus. Ymasodd Ryddach Cael Afaroc. King Ryddach has attacked Cael Afaroc. The room was roused. Men shouted and exclaimed, rose to their feet, some reaching for weapons that hung glinting on the walls. Amenawod! Betham Amenawod! They all wanted to know how far the attack had progressed. Were their women, their priestesses, harmed? Cofiwch, ffrindiau. Merlin spoke with calm authority. Mae gan fenywod Cael Afaroc, bwerau sgwyrau... Oh. Cofiwch, ffrindiau. Merlin spoke with calm authority. Mae gan fenywod Cael Afaroc, bwerau cryf, ysgiliau, rhyfelwr. They are canny too and have outwitted Ryddach and his men for now. His warband has retreated. And will feel the full wrath of our revenge, one warrior shouted. The others cheering their approval, many getting to their feet, some reaching for weapons that hung glinting on the walls. Then Gwenddolai spoke. King Ryddach has clearly shown his intentions here, and I'm quite sure is planning on conquering our territories. But this attack is surely meant as a provocation. We must not play into his hands. However, Gwenddolai knew there was only one course of action. There would be war. So, if you are interested to hear these stories that Merlin told his pig, perhaps you're even interested to know a little bit more about this pig and her significance. Perhaps you'd like to know what happened next in Merlin's life. Or you may be interested to know a bit more about me and my journey and how I got into storytelling and what is it that drives me and interests me. Why are these stories so important to me? All of this is woven into the performance Mochyn Merlin, or Merlin's Pig. So for further details, check out my website, www.millenniajackdaw.com/events. You'll find all the information of my Welsh tour. And if none of those dates and locations are available to you, then perhaps you'd like to reach out and invite me to come and perform in your area. If you think there's an audience and an interest where you live, then I'll happily come and share these stories with you. Lots of love.